Perfect. Yep.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to show you some techniques for shading with texture. When you have texture, whether it's fur like this, or feathers, or even if you're doing human hair, basically you're seeing more than one value. You're seeing some lighter spots and you're seeing some darker spots, and that's what makes it look like texture. So I'll show you how to do that. Any type of texture that you're doing, let's say if I'm doing this area here, you're always going to start by shading the whole area with your lighter value first. So if I'm going to work on this area, I'll start with just kind of a base value that I think is going to match that light value, and shade slowly and carefully so that it's nice and smooth, and shade in the direction that the fur goes or the feathers, because then any pencil lines that you do see will kind of help with your texture. Okay, now that I've got this base value in, I'm going to add some of these darker little spots in, and I'm just going to go over on top of what I have and kind of go just a little bit at a time, and it's kind of sketchy. It's not polka dots, you know, like this. It's more just slightly darker areas, almost like you're shading around the lighter areas. And also, don't make your darker spots all the same size and shape. You want to vary them a little so it's going to look, it'll look speckly. And you know, pay attention to the parts that you're doing. There may be some spots that are bigger, some of them might be smaller, some of them might be lighter, some might be darker. But this is the kind of thing that you would do for all of that texture. It'll be the same kind of thing for a feather texture, where like in this area, I would shade the whole thing with this lighter value first, then I would start to shade on those little darker spots. Even when you get into, you know, darker texture like this, you would still shade the whole thing with this light medium value and then add the dark values on. One other thing I want to show you is if you have lighter fur or feathers kind of going over darker fur like this, or even like here where the darker fur kind of overlaps the lighter fur, here's how you'll do that. You're going to shade the lighter fur on first, and again, shade in the direction that the fur goes, and just kind of get your base value on first. So that would be for like this area here. Then I can add some little texture pieces onto it because there are some slightly darker spots in there. But then to make it look like that lighter fur is overlapping, when I shade the darker fur on, I'm going to have it kind of poking into the lighter fur, like this. And some of those spots will be a little bit darker, some will be a little bit lighter. But instead of having like a hard edge in between the light value and the dark value, you're going to have more of an uneven edge. And so you're kind of shading, again, you're shading around those lighter hairs. Same thing for if you're doing whiskers like this, you don't draw them on as black lines because they're not. They're lighter. You can lightly outline them on your picture, but then when you shade, you want to make sure to shade around those whiskers so that they stand out lighter, you know, than the fur around them. So anytime you've got any kind of texture, whether it's fur of any kind, longer or shorter fur, or whether it's whiskers or feathers, you're always going to do the same steps where you start with your lighter value first. Just get that base value over the whole thing, and then add your darker values on top of that. And those darker values, you might have some that are a little lighter, some might be even a little darker still. You might have to go over it a couple of times. But that is your basic process for shading with texture.